Okay, so we're recording, so I'm gonna have everybody say their name. So go ahead and do that for who's here.
Do you want first and last?
No, you can just do first name.
Oh, okay. Sam.
Steve.
Karen. And
That
then,
it?
hold on 1 second. Dad.
Coffee.
Okay. Sorry, you couldn't hear my dad. Could you hear him?
Yeah, I heard him. Okay.
Okay. All right, big room.
All right. So we're gonna start. All right. So it's
Okay.
imagine living in a world where everyday conversations feel like trying to tune into somewhat of a radio station with static. It's sometimes the words come through clearly, sometimes they don't. For people with autism, that's exactly what their communication is like. Today, this speech will greatly enlighten you on this very common disorder we live with today. The reality is, every day in life, you probably pass about 5 people with autism that you don't know. They look just like you and me. There's no look to autism. ASD, I will be calling it ASD for short during the speech. ASD affects how individuals experience the world, how they interact with others, and especially how they communicate. The prevalence of autism spectrum disorder is so great in today's world that during the speech, I'll be calling it, oh God. ASD is a developmental condition that affects how a person communicates, interacts, and experiences in the world. It's called a spectrum because it varies widely. Some individuals are nonverbal, some individuals are verbal. It goes level 1, 2, and 3, 3 being the worst. The statistics are really staggering for autism. It's actually increased greatly in the years. This leaves a lot of parents wondering, was it something that they did during pregnancy? I know this was something that I thought. Was it something that I did or didn't do right? It leads to a lot of guilt and a lot of questions. So we're going to clear up some of these questions during this speech. Autism affects a lot of aspects of life. Firstly, diving into what it is and what it's about, which is how it affects daily communication, the great efforts made for communication supports, which make the difference between a healthy life and an unhealthy life for somebody with autism. These all coincide together seamlessly. It's kind of, in a sense, thinking of it as a spider web, starting on the inside and it spirals going outside of the web, which thus completes the web itself. In one tangle, one error, and the whole web crumbles together. And that's literally how autism is. Starting with the inside first helps to concrete and solidify everything together. And today I'll be explaining in detail what it is and why it's prevalent and the challenges it presents in communication basics, needs, and how different supports can make communication a lot more effective and inclusive for those who have ASD. So first, we're going to understand exactly what autism is. And autism spectrum disorder, it's a pervasive neurological developmental condition. It's characterized by challenges such as different social interactions, difficulties with communication, sensory needs, repetitive patterns of conduct. This can vary widely from person to person who has ASD. Its diagnosis have increased significantly with the current years for Center of Disease Control data, indicating 1 in 36, that's 1 in every 36 kids is diagnosed with autism. And this has been on the rise in the last 10 years. Diversity in symptoms and skills profile across individuals. And this creates a diagnostic, somewhat of like a landscape that requires multifaceted approaches for accurate understanding and interventions. And understanding what autism is kind of building a true acceptance. It is an essential to first understand what it is and then dispel many misconceptions surrounding it. Autism, ASD, is a developmental condition, influences how a person perceives and interacts with the world. Spectrum is important, again, because it's different for every individual. Some people may be nonverbal, as I said before, and some people may speak fluently, but struggle to interpret tone, sarcasm, or body language, as my son does, which I will explain later. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention in 2023, about 1 in 36 kids in the United States were diagnosed with autism, which is meaning, again, it's not rare. It's something that we are all likely to encounter in our lives, whether we know it or not. And this is going to lead us into our second reason and how it affects daily communication and social interactions. So we're going to take a look at how autism affects communication with those with autism and those living with somebody with autism. And for many individuals, communication challenges are not about a lack of intelligence. Trust me, my son is incredibly smart. It's nothing to do with intelligence. It's differences in how they process things, different processing orders. So let's see, for some may find it hard to put their thoughts into spoken words. Others may not easily pick up on unspoken social cues, like taking turns in a conversation, recognizing facial expressions, as my son does. And sensory sensitivities, again, with my son severely, they can play a big role. For example, in a noisy or crowded environment, communication feels overwhelming and exhausting for somebody with autism. These challenges sometimes lead to frustration or a misunderstanding for both the person with ASD and those around them. As Autism Speaks implies, these tools such as picture boards, speech generating devices, or even communication apps greatly help individuals express themselves, even if they don't use spoken words. And another key support, which again, I got all this for my son and it made a very big difference, is speech therapy, which helps individuals build language skills, improve their articulation, and develop strategies for social interaction. And my son did this for 4 years and he took off like a rocket. And he is now running circles around normal kids his age. These tools, like picture boards, are generating devices or communication apps, help individuals who are nonverbal and express themselves, even if they don't use the spoken words. That can be a really big help. Picture boards, visualizing how the day's going to go, like I do with my son. We do snack time, bedtime. It's all on a picture board. Helps them understand exactly how the day is going to go, because somebody with autism, it's all about consistency. They like to know what's going to happen. They do not like a non-schedulized day. It has to be very schedulized. So this is going to be exactly kind of talking into like sensory overloads, how he gets bright lights, loud noises, makes his communication a lot harder. And for Nolan, my son, when we go to places like indoor playgrounds where there's other kids yelling, screaming, crying, he gets really an extreme overload of sensation and sensory and ends up having a breakdown, which I know the cues and signs, because you would know if it was your child, you would know these cues and signs immediately. And we end up going into things like quiet rooms they have at these places where it's a small room, dimmed lights, and we sit for a minute and just kind of desensitize. And it really helps him in public. So, and I know this, like I said, because I live with my son, I know his cues and his coping techniques. Now, don't think for 1 minute that these challenges don't mean, again, lack of intelligence, because my son is very intelligent, but differences in expression and processing. That's really what it comes down to. It's just a difference in processing and understanding. And when we can properly communicate and with these individuals and understand their needs, their social cues, and be a part of our social society instead of keeping them out of the way in social society. It shouldn't be that way. They should be upfront, present with everybody else. It's not fair to put somebody with ASD to the side because you don't know how to deal with it. That's not fair. We're definitely capable of learning about it, being more open about it and understanding about it. And that makes a huge difference to somebody with autism when you know how to bridge that gap of communication. So finally, we're going to explore benefits of communication supports. And the good news is there's a lot of tools, a lot of strategies that bridge that communication gap, even offering extra support at children's schools. That makes the difference between success and not success. My son's school is one of the schools that actually does do that. Pull him out of the classroom, individualized needs. And it's very helpful. And it's something I think all the schools should do, but they don't. A lot of times they tell the kids they need to go to a specialized school and they don't want them in their school. And that's really sad that that happens. And again, that's not fair that that happens to that person because that's not their fault. We should be able to individualize their needs and comfort those needs. So, as I said, yes, it's something my school implies, but not every school. So as mentioned previously, an overload of mental capacity, which is purely just a person with autism hitting their mental capacity, which basically means too much noise, too much mental noise, too much sight, too much sound. It goes on. So it's a complete overload of sensory coming in too quickly at one time for someone with autism to process properly. They process at a different speed, at different rates, at different times. So it's very different for them to have to process things. Takes a little longer or different, or visual boards. Again, it goes back to that. So there's another key support, which is speech therapy. Again, my son did, and it made a world of a difference. It helps them build language skills, improves articulation, as I said before, and develop strategies for social interactions. Social skills training also makes differences, teaches conversation skills, turn taking, how to read, nonverbal cues, and the list goes on. Environmental support, which is a big one, like reducing background noise, allowing extra time for them to respond. And as I said, using visual aids, which make communication more accessible and less stressful for them. So these supports are powerful because they don't just make communication easier, they open doors to connection, education, independence, they reduce frustration, they strengthen relationships, they create opportunities for people with autism to thrive. So sensory overloads, like I said, bright lights, loud noises, it makes their communication a lot harder, and you have to take this into consideration. For my own son, Nolan, as I said, when we go to places, there's yelling, there's screaming, crying. He immediately one of his cues is covering his ears, or like I said, the use of assistance, and we go to the quiet room. I immediately acknowledge these cues. So these are clear signs that it's time for us to go. He's had mentally hit his capacity for the day. And I know this because, like I said, I live with my son. I've raised my son. I know all of his techniques, coping techniques. So again, it's nothing with intelligence. It's purely processing. So it's just a difference of processing, understanding. When we properly communicate with individuals and understand their needs and social cues, and be a part of social society instead of, again, keeping them out of social society. That's exactly where this is supposed to come into play, this communication support, why it's necessary and why it works. So these may appear to be minor differences to a typical individual, but even the smallest slight change in regulations have major impacts on somebody with autism. So in summary, basically, autism, again, it's a spectrum that affects communication in many different ways. While challenges may exist, there are effective supports, like I said, AAC, ABA therapy, speech therapy, and social skills training, environmental adjustments. It makes a tremendous difference just doing these things. So it's all about connecting. It's communication is not just about talking, it's about connecting with the child. When we support these connections, we make our community stronger. We make them a lot more inclusive for people with autism. And geez. And when we support these connections, our communities get stronger, inclusive, and more compassionate. They are people like us. They deserve love. They deserve everything that any other person gets, but in a different way of experience and interacting it. By embracing awareness, fostering acceptance, and creating inclusive opportunities, we move closer to a society where every individual's voice, talent, perspective can thrive. The more we understand and learn about ASD, the more we learn to accept it for what it is and empower it. So I ask you, the next time you come across a child with autism, I'm going to ask you, do you know for certain the certain ways to communicate with them and not be afraid to approach and interact with them, to include them in everyday activities like all other children? If one person walks away from this speech knowing one more thing they didn't know about autism, I've reached my goal for what I wanted in this speech. Even if it's just one simple thing you take away, awareness. I've reached what I wanted for this speech. That's all I ask for somebody to take away from this. So again, one more person knowing is one more person closer to the acceptance of autism. I'm going to close the speech with a simple question. What if your child struggled with autism? Would you go above and beyond to help your child and to advocate for them. I know I do, and I will continue to do for my son and others who live with autism. Autism doesn't define a person's potential, but our willingness to embrace neurodiversity defines the kind of society we become. So I ask you to be more inclusive, more aware of people with autism. They are people just like us, and they should be included in everything that we do. And again, the screen slide I have on right now is about making Halloween fun because Halloween's coming up. Teal buckets mean children are struggling with autism. My son has a teal pumpkin bucket, and it just makes awareness that, hey, they might have different sensory needs. They may not say hi or trick or treat, or they may not even be wearing a costume, because my son gets bothered by tags on outfits, and he can't wear pants because of the tags, even if I cut him off. So I just want everybody to be aware of people with autism and to include them more and be more aware, and just ask yourself, if that was your child, how would you advocate for them? So I appreciate everybody's time during the speech. I'm just going to have everybody say their name one more time just to show that everybody was here and listening for the speech. So go ahead. We're going to do a roll call.
Sam.
Steve.
Tony.
Great job.
All right. I'm going to stop recording.
Very informative. Thank